So this story starts in the late 90s as I dropped out of college to start my first business. For those of you who are old enough to remember, at that time, Netscape just replaced Mosaic as the leading browser. And I was studying computer science at Waterloo in Canada, and I was in the middle of the whole start of the web revolution. I got a summer job in San Francisco, nonetheless. So I came to the city, and I was really impressed. Money was in the air. Everyone was doing something. Everyone was involved with the dotcoms, we called them back then. They either had a business plan in the back of their pocket, or they were building a dotcom, or they just sold it for gazillions and they were funding other startups. And I was really, really impressed by this energy. And I felt like this is once in a lifetime opportunity. This is never going to happen again. And I was going to just jump on the bandwagon. So I dropped out of college and I started my first software company. My plan was really simple. I was going to work straightforward, like work hard, put 16-hour days for a couple of years. And then I was certainly going to sell my business and make millions. Okay, so I had such a clear vision of this point B. It involved me sitting on a beach somewhere in the Caribbean, sipping one of those drinks with the little umbrellas in them. And so I started working on that. At that time, I defined success as money. And it wasn't because of the money itself, it was more what it represented to me. It basically represented freedom, financial freedom. It represented the ability to work on something that inspires me at some point when I have the money, right? So, unfortunately, that's not what happened. The market crashed. And I felt like I was climbing this big mountain and kind of going with the flow, and I didn't even get the chance to enjoy the view from the top when everything just basically crumbled down. And as I was kind of getting out of the rubbles, I looked around and there were basically no opportunities in sight. Everything was vanished. Everything was gone. I went from the market where it was super easy to start something and get funding and raise money to a market that I kept making phone calls and nothing was happening. About 10% of the city left the city. All my friends that came to San Francisco at the time were gone. The city felt kind of deserted. Like I was able to actually find parking in front of my house. So this didn't work out as I planned. So around the same time that I crashed my business, I also happened to crash my Ducati motorcycle on I-280 in San Francisco. I was going about 80 miles an hour at the time. And it's a fall that very few people survive. I walked away with 4 stitches in my knee. I was extremely, extremely lucky. And as I was kind of recovering from the whole thing, the morphine was still wearing off in my body. A couple of days later, September 11 happened, literally. So what that reminded me of is that this point A, we know where it's at. It's right now, right here. But this point B, we don't really know where it is or if it's ever going to happen. And I was so attached to this point B. So that reminded me of a book I was reading at the time called The Monk and the Riddle. And the book talks about how some of us live this deferred life plan. Basically, the deferred life plan has 2 parts. Part number 1 is you do what you got to do. Part number 2 is once you've done that, you get to do what you really enjoy doing. And I felt like I was living this deferred life plan. And at the same time, I felt like I was fortunate to have a chance to actually live again after my accident and everything that happened in life. And I decided that I was no longer going to live the deferred life plan. So a couple of years later, I decided to basically start a business once again. I needed a success. At this point in my life, everything was a failure, one after another. And I decided to focus on smaller successes. So to me, that meant starting a services company as opposed to a product company. Some of you know that services, it's harder to screw up. And at the same time, you don't need as much funding to start it. You can actually do it on credit cards, which is what I did. So I started a software training company and kept going through with the motions. And we had a pretty good run. We basically took us a couple of years, more like 4 or 5, to bootstrap it. But then we got to this period of rapid growth, and growth was fun. At one point, we were number 10 fastest growing privately owned company in San Francisco Bay Area, according to the Business Times. So that felt really good. Award one after another. We were doing really well. And then we got to this point where I just kind of felt I arrived. Life was good. I was living good lifestyle. I was taking home 7-digit income, spending a month and a half on my European vacations. I couldn't complain. By all means, it was a successful venture. But at some point, it kind of became stale. I felt trapped in the whole experience. I felt like my business, by design, was never going to go past some point. And I remember at one point trying to project, what is my life going to look like 4 or 5 years out? And I saw myself solving the same problems. Okay? So at some point, it was just becoming, it was nice that it was sunny, clear skies all the time, but this mountaintop that I had climbed really didn't fulfill me. It wasn't really providing anything anymore. Having been living in San Francisco, I was quite attuned with the startup scene. Every week I would read about a startup raising millions or another one selling for billions. And it just kind of felt like these other guys, they're having more fun. They're scaling Mount Everest and I'm merely climbing a hill. It felt like they're a different league and I was in a smaller league. So at the time, Twitter was one of our clients. And after some time, they approached us and they said, hey, would you guys be interested in a possible acquisition? We want to build something called Twitter University, an internal training program. And I had a software training company at the time. And at first, I was excited. I wouldn't lie if I wouldn't say that almost every entrepreneur's dream is to sell to a company like Twitter. But then what came to my mind was a saying that Warren Buffett has for all the owners of the companies that he acquires. He basically says, look, you're not getting any wealthier. You're simply exchanging one asset you know everything about and fully control for another asset that you know little about and have very little control over. And that was certainly in our case. My brother and I owned 100% of the company. We had no outside investors. We knew everything about the business. Twitter, we knew little about, and we certainly had no control over it. So we politely declined the offer and went off to quietly celebrate. Basically, we were at this local peak, and we liked it up there, but we knew that there was something more to life. There was another level. There was some other place to go to. And we could almost see that place. It was the Twitter offer. It was right there. But what was scary was basically jumping over. We did not understand what it means. We did not understand how far down we got to fall, if we're even going to catch the ground before we destroy ourselves, and what a climb back up is going to look like. It wasn't obvious. I remember a story about General Cortez when in the 1500s he attacked the Aztec Empire, and as his men got off their ships, he gave them the order to burn the ships down. And the message was clear. There's only one way forward, and that's it. We're going to win, or we're going to just die. There's no going back. So for us, burning of the ships meant that, A, we would have to tell all our employees that about half of them are not coming with us. They were just going to be let go. And some of these guys, they were our friends for many, many years. That was really tough. Secondly, we had to tell our clients that we're no longer going to be able to serve them. And these are the clients that they were very generous to us for many years. And finally, it's this emotion of unwinding about a decade of work, of a project that we proudly poured ourselves into. So that's what burning of the ships looked for us. But what was ahead was this opportunity to build something new, something bigger. And as we were meeting more and more with the Twitter folks, we realized how, first of all, they're super smart people, and secondly, they're working on some really interesting and challenging problems. And that in itself provided an opportunity to learn. And that in itself was driving force forward once we had no way to go back. So we decided to basically go ahead and say yes to the opportunity. At the same time, I remember changing my definition of success. It was no longer about money. I did not care really about the freedom anymore. I did not feel not free in a way. What I cared about was the impact. At the time, Maracana was just a tiny company, and we were affecting maybe 10,000 people a year. But Twitter, on the other hand, represented this platform that provided an opportunity to work on 1 billion-person problems. And that was very inspiring in itself. I remember reading this book called The Innovator's Dilemma, and it talks about technologies. It talks about how the current technology usually gets disrupted by a new technology. And companies that represent one technology barely make it from one to another. So a good example is the PC industry disrupting the mainframes. And now we have the mobile industry, all the phones and tablets disrupting the PCs. And the companies that were kings of the hill in one case rarely make it to the next stage. That's because they're way too comfortable at that success point, and they just don't want to invest in something that is scary, uncertain, risky. So it felt to me that life was sort of similar in a way. So back to the point A, point B, I realized that that point B, if I'm attached to it, I'm going to be disappointed. The world is too complex. It's changing all the time, and I'm almost certainly not going to hit it. A little better plan, in my mind, was to basically focus on climbing one hill at a time, but having that North Star as a commitment, not attachment. There's a subtle but profound difference there. So basically, another thing that was obvious to me after my experience was that success in itself can be a trap. What I realized is that what I enjoyed was the climb itself. I enjoyed the journey. The destination is great as a point to celebrate, to look around, to kind of enjoy it for a moment, but staying there in itself felt like a trap for me. So my final blueprint for getting to the next level sort of looks like this. I still have that point B in mind, and it still involves sipping drinks with the little umbrellas in them. But I'm basically focusing on climbing small successes one point at a time and really enjoying the journey. Thank you.